Hello, my name is Lucas Cronin. This is my legal debate with air ambulances. So, a quick outline is we're going to cover what air ambulances actually do, some of the issues that are brought up with air ambulances, how states are going after the Airline Deregulation Act. We'll also be looking at a few case studies as well pertaining to the Deregulation Act and also the states trying to pass state law. We'll also look at where states have been successful in passing state laws, what other federal solutions have been brought up to help kind of settle that debate, the effects of the No Surprises Act, and also the conclusion. So, what do air ambulances do? Well, first things that they do is transport specialized personnel to patients. So that is where they get a more specialized doctor and transport them to the patient themselves. Another what they do is they transport the patients to hospitals. So let's just say they got into a car wreck, and then they call a helicopter to pick them up, and then bring them to the hospital. Another thing they do is transfer patients to a more advanced hospital. We'll talk about that more in the next slide here. So why would people choose air ambulances? Well, there's many factors that go into air ambulances. First one is weather. So if it's too stormy or too rainy and airplanes won't be able to fly, then they'll take an ambulance to complete that mission of transferring a patient or going to rescue somebody. Another one is the patient condition. If they're in a very serious trauma and they need to have go to a higher level hospital, they might choose to do a helicopter to evacuate the patient out of there rather than waiting for an ambulance to show up and have to go through traffic. Which that's also another thing that they have to consider is how bad is the traffic. Also, location of the nearest hospital as well is another consideration, and including the levels of hospitals too, which I have here in the picture, where there's different levels of hospitals that are capable to do certain things. So, like basic emergency for level 5 to level 1, where it's 24 immediate coverage by surgeons, so you can get any surgeon at any time. Which that's where you have the different type of levels, and of course, level 1 is the most expensive hospital that you can probably ask for. So some issues with air ambulances come down to two things. One is cost, which majority of them are out of network, which what that means is it's outside of your insurance's coverage. So that means you'll have to pay fully out of pocket for air ambulances. The median cost is around 21,000 for patients. However, the average operating cost for air ambulances is roughly around 6,000 to 13,000, which that's kind of interesting. Which that brings us to market failure, which there's a high demand for ambulances to get transport patients from place to place or to get save their lives from a crash scene to the ambulance. Plus, there's low competition too with these air ambulances too, so they don't really compete for prices. And even worse is patients don't usually get to choose which air ambulance they could get. They're usually gonna get the first one that's there. So what that means is they could probably get an out of they're gonna get an out of network or maybe even if they get lucky an in network one. They don't have a choice on which ambulance they get. So because of those issues, we have states that are trying to pass laws to kind of deal with those issues and costs and the market failure problems that air medical have. However, they face a hurdle with the Airline Deregulation Act. So the Air Deregulation Act is where federal and state don't have a say on where planes fly, how much they charge, and pretty much whatever they want to charge or do. And kind of the original goal of the Deregulation Act is to kind of promote competition to drive prices down. So that way customers can have a more fair share, and it kind of plays right into how capitalism is supposed to work is you patients get to choose the cheaper price, which helps all lower the prices down. However, it fails to meet the air ambulances because again, patients don't get to choose which ambulance they get. And again, so due to that not being able to pick, well, there's no competition really of wages or how much they have to charge for fares. Plus, it's their life's on the line too, so they can charge as high as they wish to get as much money as they can out of them. So the first case study that we're going to look at is a certificate of need. So what a certificate of need is where a state approves or expands services like healthcare in a certain area. However, they have to get approval of the state first in order to operate in there. And the goal is to avoid overutilization, which that what that is where you have so many resources put into somewhere that it just increases prices on stuff where it's again just overutilizing a resource, and it helps keep prices low too, so you don't have to ferry all these resources just not get used and just get expensive. And unfortunately, how this affects air ambulances is where now the state gets to dictate if they can fly in there or not. which, however, is highly against the Deregulation Act, where, again, they can't decide where they fly into. And that's kind of the big debate in in many of those cases regarding certificate of need is the state shouldn't dictate where they can fly. So the second case study that we'll be looking at is Valley Medflight versus Dwelly. So this is where North Dakota created a list of air ambulances, mainly 75% health coverage. So if you are part of a in-network system, you are going to be on that list of, hey, these are the air ambulances that EMTs will call to either have you rescued or even just transfer you from different hospitals. So as long as they provide a sufficient amount of coverage in network. However, the federal district court ruled that due to this law of making that list, gave more treatment towards the ones that had lower prices than the one with the high, influencing the prices as a whole as a state, which is based on what the federal district court ruled was against the Airline Deregulation Act, which is a very interesting case where it's still hotly debated on this one of if that was against the Airline Deregulation Act or were they just doing a little gesture for patients to really help give them more choice on which air ambulance they would want to use. The third case study we'll be looking at is insurance company requirements. So this is from Guardian Flight LLC versus Godfried. This is another North Dakota one where it required insurance companies to pay for out-of-network air ambulances. So this is where, hey, if it's out of network, you should still pay for it with the insurance company. The goal was to give a more balanced billing for patients in emergency situations where this is where the insurance and the out-of-network air ambulances can dictate what's a more fair price. So this is where they do some more negotiating of prices. However, the court ruled that creating a state rate on air ambulances through insurance companies was affecting the price overall, and again violating the Airline Deregulation Act. And again, this was also hotly debated too, of saying that, hey, this is more focused on the insurance companies than the out-of-network air ambulances. But again, the court ruled that the state was creating a rate on air ambulances. So the fourth case study we're going to look at is state funding, in particular the Wyoming Medicaid waiver. One thing is the state funds to pay for coverage for the entire population. So this is where Wyoming provided medical coverage for the population. And that's one thing they provide. But the second thing they wanted to include was a central call center to dispatch in-network ambulances to patients. So any patient that's in-network, they make sure to call those ambulances over to go help the patient, maybe either transfers or to rescue them if they have some trauma, to guarantee that they had a choice on what network they are in. However, it was shot down under the same reason as Valley Med Flight v. Dinwell, where they were influencing the more lower costing ambulances and picking them out. So that in turn violated the Airline Deregulation Act. So in the fifth case study that we have is workers' compensation. So workers' compensation fee schedules is where they provide full coverage for an injured worker from paying in full. So what that means is it prevents them from having to pay that $21,000 in air medical fees. And however, this led to debate between two different courts on how it affects air med transportation. So in particular, the Texas Supreme Court, it ruled in Texas Manual versus PHI Air Medical, ruled that it did not violate the Airline Deregulation Act. What they ruled up on that is it didn't affect the price that much, and again, it was more to the benefit of both parties to try and work out a deal to make sure that the worker is compensated and everyone's paid fairly. However, in the federal district court, they ruled in Air Evac EMS versus Sullivan that they did violate the Airline Deregulation Act due to reimbursement process that restricted the amount paid to air ambulances. So how they do the reimbursement process kind of affected the price that was given to the medical air ambulance. So that's where that debate came into play. So there's a split decision on that on does that particular factor affect the Airline Deregulation Act. Even through all the different court cases, states still managed to find a way to come up with some methods to deal with these issues without violating the Airline Deregulation Act. For example, there's plenty of states that establish a public or nonprofit air ambulance service for people that they are trying to protect from kind of the iffy business practices of other air ambulances. Which, for example, what Maine did was they quickly formed the nonprofit air ambulances for whoever's a citizen of Maine. And also for those that can't afford it, they made sure to make it cheap enough for them so that they can utilize that service if they need a transfer or even if they're in dire need of an emergency, get evacuated to a hospital without having to worry about the $21,000 they may have to pay. And for public, it could be absolutely free. So if you're in a state that offers public air ambulance services, you can probably get a full free flight with that because it's going from tax dollars into funding that type of service. And again, it creates lower costs, and again, it can be absolutely free. A quote that kind of matches that type of mindset comes from Proverbs 3:27. Do not withhold good from those whom it is due, when it is in your power to act. So, for example, with Maine, if they decide to use their power to act on it to provide a more nonprofit air ambulance service for those who need that medical attention, and which is, again, good. But if you make it so expensive that it withholds that type of good, and you decide not to use your power to act on trying to make it cheaper and more affordable to people, that's where I kind of read how I read Proverbs 3:21. Another thing that states can do is regulate air ambulance membership plans. So what the air ambulance membership plans do is it provides a type of insurance for when for some reason this type of air ambulance is probably not in your network. You can pay for their membership plan so that if in a case that they do pick you up and you have that membership plan, that way you can exchange that membership to make sure that you don't have to pay a dime with the air ambulance service because you played the membership. One major downside to that, though, is again, you don't have a choice on what air ambulance shows up, and those membership plans are not transferable to other air ambulances. So, since you just put all your money into that air ambulance, it might not be the one that picks you up. So, what states have found a way to deal with that problem is they can rule it as insurance. So, since it's insurance, states now can use insurance law that they have in their states to influence if they can allow that membership within their state, which has been apparently allowed so far and hasn't violated the Airline Deregulation Act. As the states are continually battling with that type of out-of-network ambulance and finding ways around it, luckily in 2022, the federal side of things finally came out with something called the No Surprises Act. The goal of this act is to try to protect people with private health insurance from getting surprise bills, like again the airmen with the $21,000 from out-of-network providers. And again, the goal is to pretty much give the patients more say on what air ambulances they use, and also understand what type of air prices with the different air ambulances, and better having a kind of more of a choice in what they want to do. Plus, it prevents out-of-network providers from charging rates higher than in-network rates. So, for example, I would say if you're an in-network air ambulance, they'll probably offer, like, let's just go with the bare minimum of, let's just say, 15,000. However, if you're out-of-network, what they would do is they up the charge to 21,000 because you're not in-network. Which that's one thing that this No Surprises Act is supposed to solve. So, what are some effects of the No Surprises Act? So, again, it focuses more on insurance companies to discuss fees with air ambulances rather than directly with the patient. So, this is where the insurance companies, while talking to air ambulance that may have delivered their patient that was out of network, now they have to try and come to an agreement of what price is fair between the insurance company and the air ambulance. So, they have to discuss what type of rate is more preferred between the two. The government can settle disputes between the two if there is a problem. So they'll have to go through arbitration to be like, hey, this is why this price is unfair. This is why this price needs to be what it is. And then the government, if there's not a good consensus that is made, the government can now step in and decide, okay, no, this is a fairer rate, or yeah, this rate is more fair. You should pay more, or you should pay less. What this does not cover is people that don't have insurance or any coverage for that matter. So if they're using public or again doesn't have any coverage, they're not protected by the No Surprises Act. So that means they can still now upcharge them the 21,000 that is due, rather than have to go through arbitration with an insurance company. And there's many debates about should there have been a federal cap on prices for using out-network services? So instead of burdening them with the 21,000 median or even higher, why not put a cap on that so the prices don't just continually go up and increasing costs because of that market failure that that type of system provides? So that's a huge debate, and I would love to hear you guys' opinions on that. In conclusion, air ambulances are critical to people's recovery and making sure that they get the resources they need so that they can survive. Also, the effect on patients' finances before the No Surprises Act were astronomical, and it's unfortunate that so many people had to pay that much of a price just so that they could get the care and live. Also, a step forward with the No Surprises Act, which helps make those fees a lot cheaper, and it helped try to curb stomp the non-competition and make it more competitive in the air medical market. However, we're going to have to do more research on how this new law affects premium prices in insurance and the arbitration process that they'll have to go through if they ever have a dispute between the insurance companies and the air medical. We're going to have to see more cases of that before we can really say how good the No Surprises Act was for patients that are in need of care. But yeah, that should be all, and thank you all for listening. Hopefully you all have a wonderful day.